Did it?
It's recording.
Okay. Well, folks, it's official then. A webinar has begun. Thank you all very much for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for taking your part. And we will. Okay, great. So, folks, I'm going to kick it off. As a marketing guy, I can't help myself. We've got a few PowerPoint slides I want to go through just to give folks who may not be familiar with where we've taken the product over the last few years, an idea of where we've taken it and why we've done that. Go ahead and talk about Spectrum version 14. It was the industry's first true cloud-based computing ERP for the industry. I'm going to explain, just take a few minutes and explain what that exactly means and why we did that. Went through the considerable effort to essentially redesign the way that you interact with Spectrum and the technologies used to deliver the software to you. So fundamentally, why cloud technology? Well, the way we're using software has changed. Just consider 5, 6, 7 years ago, before iPhones even existed. It's a little bit hard to even imagine those times at this point in our lives. But it wasn't that long ago, and our computing was essentially done on our desktops or laptops that typically had to have software loaded on them or have a good solid connection back to the office for VPN type of operation. Well, that's changed, and we all know it. We all compute differently. We access applications and apps dramatically differently. So therefore, the way that software needs to be designed and is being designed has had to change, and that's what Dexter and Cheney realized about 5 or 6 years ago when we began the effort to move from version 13 to version 14 in a new delivery platform, namely the cloud. So bear with me, folks, for about 2 minutes. Promise no longer than that. I'm going to take you through a very brief abridged version of cloud computing. Anybody who wants more information on this, let me know. I've got to bore you to tears with this topic, but I want to bring, for those of us who remember the 60s and 70s, and we're actually back then, guess what? We were using cloud computing because essentially cloud computing is a situation in which you have and you access these centralized shared resources from essentially dumb terminals. Now, our smartphones aren't dumb, our tablets aren't dumb, but they're certainly not robust, hugely powerful computing devices. Gate here in Seattle, starting the PC. I'll show you what I think is a very interesting graph here in a moment. Starting a 2+ decade romance, if you will, with the personal computer, which derailed this concept of a centralized, by most measures, efficient way of delivering computing power and data storage. No, let's instead distribute it on desktops all over the world. And very successful model. Made quite a few people these clouds started to connect. It was the beginning of the internet, which yes, technically started back in the 60s, but now it started to pick up. You started to have bulletin board services, those who remember those, ways to start talking to other computers. And then in the 90s to the aughts, this really took off. The internet took off, not just the pipes connecting people, but the protocols of the internet started to develop, and that is where the World Wide Web comes in. which is really the protocol layer on top of the pipes of the internet. And this magic of the web began, and all information servers all over the world, but yet we still weren't intimately connected. We special software on our computers. If we wanted to do heavy processing, we needed to still have pretty robust client devices, laptops, what have you. This is the graph that is really fascinating to me, and it's actually interesting. It ends in 2011. I haven't found a good example of this going forward yet. Anyone who has, please send it to me. I'd love to see it. But here is this huge takeover of the Windows Intel conglomerate. Essentially, you're seeing in the big blue blob there the rise of the personal computer, and at the end you see the beginning of the decline of the personal computer. Certainly not going to go away, but you can see that mobile devices are really the way things are going, and it's not the smartphones and tablets. It's just mobile computing in general is taking over, and being able to access powerful software where data, small devices, is something that we are now actually becoming used to and is impossible in the realm of just PC computing. And so now here's the world we're in more or less today, where we have the ability to access multiple applications regardless of where we are, what device we're using the most powerful app on all of our devices, which is the browser button, right, to go to Safari or Internet Explorer or what have you, and access web-based software that is designed specifically to work in the cloud to make use of the internet, both pipes and protocols of the internet, work in a browser-based environment. Then you become agnostic to the type of device you're using, what software device, browser, yes I do, then I can access my software and as much data as I care to access. That is what cloud computing developed. It's why 5 years ago we made the commitment to go to that platform and redesign Spectrum specifically to work in a cloud environment while keeping all of its functionality that you are familiar with and helps you run your business. So a few considerations, and I'll turn it over to Job. Security is always brought up as the number one concern with cloud computing. Understandable. I will tell you, I do have a background in engineering despite my marketing role here, and I will guarantee that the number one threat to security actually has nothing to do with the very highly encrypted channels over which your data is traveling, or the certified connections that you're making to a data center. The threat to security, biggest threat, is not having cloud computing and having someone with a flash drive or a USB drive who just decides to walk up to your server room and grab some data, or a disgruntled employee who decides to give away password information. That remains the weak link in security systems and always will be. And there is an argument to be made that cloud computing actually makes social engineering and the human aspect of security breaches a lot more difficult. You'll see some things on the slide here. There's a lot to talk about on the topic of security, and if anyone here has questions, I would love to talk to you about that from a technical standpoint, about what type of security you can expect from cloud computing. There are significant benefits to working in this cloud-based environment. You can read them here. You have obviously improved access for remote and field staff. You basically can access the full power of an ERP system from a tablet, working on a job site if you're connected. You also have complete independence regarding the devices and the operating system. So are you working off of a Windows-based PC? No problem. Laptop? Sure. Working in an iOS device like an iPhone or iPad? That's great. Android? Also great. Doesn't a huge to us. We can reduce dramatically the cost of implementing client hardware and software because you don't need it in a cloud computing environment, which leads to the next point, overall reduced IT burden. We actually have numbers, happy to share with anybody who's interested, showing the savings that, in fact, a local client of ours, WG Clark, realized when they moved to a cloud computing environment. Their IT savings, which they tracked, were quite significant. And in general, we find that that is the case. And then finally, folks, this is where the industry is going. All of your next generation applications are being built in this technology. Mobile apps, if you want them to integrate with your ERP systems, you're going to be needing an ERP system that does play well with others in the cloud. So, why version 14? Well, hold on, that's a duplicate slide. There we go. I wanted to talk to everyone on the line right now is a version 13. And we much love, we appreciate you. We will be continuing support this year, so you'll get your, we will have tax table updates at the end of this year for version 13, but this will be the last year that we will support that. So you know, so you can plan. At the end of 2017, we will not, and Joff, correct me if I mislead here in any way, shape, or form. We will still, however, take support calls for version 13 as long as you are on up to date with your maintenance support here with us at Dexter and Cheney. You can still call in and we will help you, needless to say. If you have custom programming, a couple things. We are scaling back just about to zero right now any new, significantly new projects for custom programming in version 13. That said, of course, if you have very specific issues or needs, reach out to us, to your account manager, and our goal is to make you happy. So we will do what we need to do, but we are scaling that back. And on a positive note, for custom programming will be moved over to version 14 when you move, and we'll make sure that that everything is working as you would expect in the new version. So, so with that, Joff, I think let's turn it over to you if you want to switch.
We're switching presenters here. Susan asked, what are we talking about here? Tax tables? Are we talking tax tables, or are we talking programming? Basically, it's going to be the tax tables as well as any changes the IRS makes to the W-2, the 1095 stuff, any updates, that kind of stuff we'll probably won't be dealing with much. Be on we have a new conference room. Okay, so okay, good, we're good. Okay, so everybody, I've lost. A couple from. So now in version 13, we have to load a client or a piece of software on your on each of your machines. Here we just go to a web page and dial in. And one thing I want you to keep in mind, we have a sandbox site that is for clients to play with. So if you want to play around with version 14, let us know. We can get you an account, and the idea is to go play till your heart's content. Now, dashboard, this is something just it says my equipment with me. these are spectrum tab here. I do want to point out is that if you are running this locally, you can run it over the web. You wouldn't have these issues. Isn't this fun to have internet issues while we're trying to show you how cool it is? But, you know, it is what it is. We're using, this is a hosted site, so it's accessible out there on the internet. And I guess we have some traffic. That's kind of embarrassing, but, you know, it's always fun, and it makes my job that much more silly. Did it come back? There we go. Finally, it came back. Again, we are not, you know, in version 14, you can run this on your own servers or you can run it on our servers. Of course, if you're running it on your servers, it's basically your own cloud. Okay, so all of this to get to this page, because here's my negative cash flow. Again, you see I have cash in, I have cash out. And if you look down here at the billing, you can see that my negative cash flow would be corrected or a little bit better if the client would actually pay me, which I'm sure that point out. Over here, I've got what we call an info bar, and over here on the right, I've got my navigation bar. Navigation bar has favorites. These are screens that you want to go to. You can also, as the administrator, push out different tasks, give folks the ability to go to certain screens. You would just go ahead and you would set them up that way. And they work, and the favorites work just like you'd expect. When I say that I want to go to the jobs page, I click it and it will launch another Spectrum tab and take me to that jobs page. Now, one thing I want to point out is you're going to see these Spectrum tabs. You can have as many of these open as you want. This does not count as multiple users. It's one user. And one thing one of the early things that folks here at Dexter and Cheney and then the folks that have actually upgraded to version 14 tell me is one of the best things in the world is you can have multiple tabs going. Right now, let's just say that I was on the job analysis screen and your boss came up and said, hey, I need to know something about a vendor. Well, you can open up another tab, go to accounts payable, go to the vendor page. You can go to, say, open items, and if you know the vendor code or you can search for it, I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm looking for the office supply. And we're having wonderful internet problems. I never have these problems. Well, when all else fails, let's see, come on. There we go. See, I was typing office. This is embarrassing. A couple things I just want to point out is, you notice I just typed the word office and it did a quick search. This is something that's new in version 14. So part of the name, I typed it in, it did a quick search for me. So, okay, so even though I was working over on the job, I'm now looking at the vendor's invoices, and I can drill into all of this information from here. And then when I'm done, I can just go back to my job analysis. Okay? Now, a couple things to point out. This info bar, this is probably one of the most exciting things in version 14. When you click on a record, the info bar will contextually change to tell you about it. So you can see this is my Cascadia Park West job. Now I'm looking at the One Season Hotel and Tower, and here is the Link Light Rail project. Now what's nice about this is you can use this info bar to navigate everywhere. We all know in version 13, you go to a module, go to the category, the grouping, and then you choose the actual menu option. And what's happening, what happens is, when you're done, you have to escape back and go back, or whatever to get back to the menu so you can go somewhere else. But you don't have to now. So if I'm looking at a job, I want to show you that in my properties here, this is my setup stuff. I have costs. And in the costs, what's kind of cool is that I can jump right into my subcontracts, which we all know is in the AP module. I can look at my job requisitions, which is part of the inventory module. And I can look at materials, which is part of purchase order and also part of inventory. I don't have to go back to the menu and go somewhere else. And we found that this has made things so much easier for the casual user that comes in and uses Spectrum. And by the casual user, I'm talking about like our project managers. So the project manager comes in, they can come into this, say, job analysis screen, and maybe they want to see something specific about this project. And so we've created this concept called a job dashboard. The job dashboard, again, is going to be some specific set of data for this project. There we go. And so you can see here's my project management. These are documents that are outstanding. Some are past due. Here is a gain fade graph. You can see over time, you can see that my revised contract, I was in a negative, I had some profit fade here, and then I got my contract taken care of. We've got a job to date progress, whether it's bill to date or cost to date. We can look at the contract shift so we can see how things have changed. Hours, labor hours, again, that are a percentage complete. So this is just information for the project manager so that they can best do their job. Main page here. And these are going to be the things that you've seen before. This is where the address goes. This is where you put in the GPS coordinates. Your legal description, this is where we use the lien releases. One thing I want to point out is we have a much more robust customer and vendor and subcontractor lien release system in version 14. If you want, you can, since there's an address or GPS coordinates, you can view where the project is at on a map if you want to, and using Google Maps. I'm going to go to phase file maintenance. So I click phase file maintenance, and here we are in phase file maintenance. Now notice this is a grid. If I start editing in here, I can just start entering data, and I put in the phase, the cost type, and continue to move forward. So we can go ahead and say begin editing, and I want to do a new row, and we're going to go ahead and say this phase, and it's going to be, oops, and I want to do a labor cost type, and this is more stuff. And you see I'm just entering the data. This is, 500 hours and a cost of $45,000. And I can enter the next phase. Now, you can do it, continue to do it this way. You can also do it in what we call more of a window format, and that's where you've got the window that we all know and love, and this is how you can enter that same phase information from this window. I also can control what columns on this screen I want to see. So, I only had a few columns there, but I can choose to have all of the columns, and so if I select all, what this does is it gives me my grid that I can enter directly into. It lets me, I get all of those fields, okay? So again, it's different than what we've had before, but it gives you some options on how to do your data entry. Okay, some things that are also new and exciting, much different than before, and this is our contacts, job contacts. When you set up a contact, let's go ahead and choose this person right here. These contacts are used in the context of project management when you send out an RFI, a field question, you can send them to these people. You also can have contacts at your vendors and at your customers. And one thing I want to point out that I like is this default as a job contact on contracts and subcontracts. So this is a vendor. And so when I set up this, if I set up this vendor's as a subcontractor, Lisa is going to show up on my job contact list automatically. And then, of course, I can add additional phone numbers. I can add these things called attributes. Attributes are things that you create where you can say, these are and you can actually search and sort by those different attributes. So if we change the address or phone number of Lisa's organization, this whole thing some really cool things that are out there. I don't know what to say, guys. This is just wonderful.
Well, I'm going to blame it on my laptop.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, because we are using your laptop. That is true.
Okay.
That is true. Okay, finally, I think it's all, it is kind of an old new one, sir.
We'll talk to my boss.
Okay. Again, just notice the options we have here on the info bar. I can go to projected cost entry, which we know is in job cost. I can look at job cost history. I can look at equipment site. All that stuff I get there with a single click. So here we are back at that tree grid. And again, when I click the little plus, it expands the data out. Now I can choose different grouping methods. I've got a whole bunch already built in. Or I can just drag the column onto the sorting row here, and it will make these sorts for me. Now we all know, and of course just like you'd expect, you can move the columns around. You can save these. Be there, use the little icon that kind of looks like Excel, and these are the columns I want, and it's going to create a download file that if I click, it's going to launch Excel. It's going to give me a security message, which is fine. And then here is the, oops, I'll view these later. I don't know what they are. And then here's that data already for us. So this is just another managers, the ability, they can manage their data in Excel if they want to. You have that same kind of view, the same history as well. Okay, one change that has been a significant change, and that is the way we do document imaging. And today, when you see document imaging, we have a slider bar here, and so as you pull the image. Now, we're using a new technology called Ajax. Ajax is something similar to like Google Maps. It's the way, you know, in Google Maps, when you keep moving around, it starts or this is working, and in theory, that's how this should be working as well. I am just, you know, I'm about ready to go on vacation, so this is probably my punishment for going on vacation. Okay, well, forget it. I am going to move on. Let's go look at change requests. Again, change requests are part of the AR module, and not in. And I haven't had to go back out. So this is my change request. Let's say issues with column 4. Let's look at this guy. Request. We've changed the interface. In version 13, we had contractor pricing and subcontractor pricing. We have eliminated that need to have 2 different places. So when you come into the change request screen, instead of a 30-column description field, you now have 250. it told me you needed more change. But then when we go to the cost tab, this is where, and this is another one of those grids, this is where you can come in and start entering the information. So if I say 010200 and I say S for subcontracts, and I put in my estimate amount of $100,000, and then for my subcontractor, I'm going to go ahead and I know that it's this code. I could also search for it, and I know it's this subcontract number. I'm actually creating the subcontract. This is the subcontract change request entry as well. Okay? Now, so you don't have to do it in 2 different pages. Another thing I want to point out is that we're trying to be more useful to the user. So if I put a thing, I want in a phase called 223344, and I hit enter, and I say I want cost type M and hit enter, instead of it saying record not in file, jc.thse or whatever it does, it says, hey, do you want to add a new phase? And I can say, sure I do. And it will bring up that window that we saw before. Remember that phase window that we looked at a little bit ago. So the idea is that when you're adding a phase on the fly, we're trying to be a little bit nicer. Rather than just saying, hey, you gunky, this doesn't work, we're asking, do you want to set this up? Of course, if your folks don't have access to set up a phase, they won't be prompted to set up a phase. But if you want to, but if they have that, this is the way they can do that. Of course, they can also F4 window and click the new button as well. Speaking of F4, I do want to make sure that everybody knows the function keys don't go away. Some do, but not all of them. We still have F3 for save and end, which is the same as this big green save button up here. We still have F4, which is the search window. And we still have the escape key, which is cancel. But you do not need anymore the F6, F5, F6, F7, and F8. Add mode is a thing of the past. What you're going to see as we go through the pages, you're going to see that if I entered in a new change request number that doesn't exist in the database, the system automatically goes to add mode. But if that number already exists, it puts you into change mode. And then delete, we made a special option up on the command bar so that you still can delete things out that you need to. Now on this change request, here are my costs. I can have markups, I can have add-ons, I can have a fee to help me price out that change request if I so desire to use that. Just like you can do today, but you can still price the change request. We're trying to help you price the change request with these screens. Okay. One thing that has not changed, and that is reports. We still have the ability to using Crystal. The thing that has changed is instead of it being reports that are loaded on your computer, we're printing them or we're deriving the reports on the server, and then we send them out to you as a PDF. And so from here, you'll be able to email them. You can save them, store them. You can store them in DI if you want to. Your Crystal reports that you modify, you may want to change a few things because we did add some new columns. There are some tables we got rid of. And let me rephrase that. The tables we got rid of, that sounds really horrible. But in version 13, when you update payroll, you're locking the entire job table because we are letting you post one date to that job that, hey, last certified payroll date. Well, that was kind of silly because, that there's no reason to lock the job. Or if someone was in the job, it would lock payroll. So we've cleaned things like that up. And if you happen to be using those tables, we have a map that will help you basically go, this is what it was, and this is where it's coming to. We call our menu system, we call it the sitemap. So we still have all of the options here. So like you've seen before, we've got accounts payable, data entry, and we can go ahead and look at invoice approval, vendor invoices, all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I can continue to move around the various pages as well. Oh, I love that message. There we go. So invoice approval. I only have one invoice here, but you'll notice that it is in a tree grid, which means I could sort this in a variety of ways. So I get to look at this. Now, the idea, the strategy is that you see your invoice, and then once you select it, you're going to see the coding down below. I can look at my routing and add notes. I can change the phase it's assigned to. If I have security, I can even edit the invoice, the distribution part of that vendor invoice, not the header portion of the invoice if I've been given security. And then one of the things folks have told us is that when you say you want to select this for approval, I highlight it, I click the approve button, it's a green check mark here. And it doesn't automatically disappear until you say update now. And that's because folks told us that they might want to change their mind. So, or they wanted to go through and do their approval and then give it one last look before they said go. So we give you a kind of a two-step process there. Another area that I think is pretty exciting is that in vendor invoice entry. Right now in version 13, you have 5 different screens to enter an invoice. You have invoice entry, you have invoice approval invoice entry, you have PO receiving, you have subcontractor billing, and you have back charge entry. Those have all been collapsed into this one screen. So if I can enter my vendor code. Oops, I don't think it's going to like it. Didn't like my, that's fine. Here we go. And I can put in my invoice number like I always have. And if I put in a purchase order, the screen becomes PO receiving. If it's a subcontract, it becomes a subcontract for billing, and the screens change accordingly. I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter through this, and this is our regular vanilla standard AP invoice. And so we have $100. If there was sales tax, I can enter that in. You can see that by the standard dates we had. One of the things that always drove me up the wall was trying to explain to people what the prepaid invoice meant. Now we're just calling it an instant manual check because that's what everybody else calls them. And so rather than making you learn a new term that has no bearing anywhere else in the world, we're calling them an instant manual check or a credit card purchase. You get to do that all from here. Okay, invoice remarks. You'll notice there's some white space here. One of the new features we've added is the ability to have multiple addresses for this vendor. So you might have an invoice that say goes to Graybar, and you want to send it either the PO or the AP invoice and the check. You want to send it to Graybar in Seattle versus Graybar in Cleveland, and you can definitely do that. And when those are set up, this box lights up, and you'll have some options in there. Okay, so now we're down to our grid. So I'm going to go ahead and change my GL code. I'm going to put in my job. Again, these are all search windows just like they are today, but you'll notice you have all of these columns to enter your data into now. Some people are like, I don't want to enter all that stuff. Well, you still can hit F3 and it'll take you to the next line. So we've got a bunch of shortcuts and stuff built into the system. You go ahead and say save or hit F3, and it will, and because it's trying to print me a new check, it wants to print a check, and then I can go ahead and enter my next transaction and go on. Now, one thing that's nice is here's your unposted batch. See how it in real time tells you how many transactions, and and if I click it, I get a search window where I can select that. Yeah, I want to look at that one, and so it'll call it back up. Again, notice I didn't hit F5 add mode or F6 change mode. I just entered in the vendor, the invoice number, and that it's an invoice, and the system does the rest. We also give you nice warning messages. Hey, no changes will be saved. Exit or stay. It sounds really silly, but we thought long and hard about what words to use there. So it may seem silly to you, but it was a big deal for us because we really wanted to make the system as intuitive and user-friendly as possible. One of the things, there we go, one of the things that folks, new users always ran into was draw requests. Remember we always told you that you had to create the first draw request in add mode and you never wanted to do it in change mode and blah, blah, blah. Well, now the system is smart enough that when I type in my job number, it knows what my last application number was, and if it's number 1, it's in add mode, and if it's number 2, it's in change mode. So in other words, it does it for you. Do we have any questions coming through?
A couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So some going back to something you showed a bit earlier. the contacts, showing our contacts integration with Outlook.
Right now, we don't have an integration with Outlook. It is on the list to do, and how we want to do that is use something called web services. For those of you that may remember something called use web services where one computer talks to another to import the data. And so we are working on the web services to sync up the contacts between Spectrum and, say, Outlook or other third-party applications.
Right. And the other question we have just came in, when to do invoice receiving, can you just type in a PO number, or do you need to go to the vendor, then invoice amount, then PO number?
When you're coming, so we're back in that vendor invoice entry screen. In PO, when you want to do a PO receiving, you're going to first need to put in the vendor code and then the invoice number, and then you type in the actual purchase order. So this is a change. And it, with all steps forward, there's a step back. Clients had told us they hated having that you can't just enter the PO number first. That was one of the trade-offs.
Great.
Okay, so this is draw requests. That's basically the same, other than it's protecting you from blowing it up like we've done in the past. We can do a lot of good stuff there as well. Now, payroll, let's be honest, we always do payroll features. We're always doing accounts payable features. One of the things that we are doing in version 14, and this may not have, you may not have run into this yet, but and that is the concept of electronic certified payroll reporting. In the state of California, on their state jobs, you must file electronically using the EC that are using what's called the ASHTOWARE format. And that's something too that is different. And I guess I forgot to harp on that because I just take it for granted. In version 13, when we released it, the features that were there were the features we had. And we would do bug fixes, but there was no new features that would come online. In version 14, we've changed stuff in the back end. So we're adding new features all the time to the software. Every service you choose to use or not, you don't have to use them. And so like I said, the ASHTOWARE, this came out in the service pack that we just released. ECPR came out the last rule. In this case, you have a policy, and you can say that they're until you release them, and you could actually like the project manager or whoever wants to do they can look at these and they can say, okay, this one right here is in a review status, it's okay to pay, so let's go ahead and pay it. And then it's released and accounts payable can make those changes. Okay. Any other questions there? We're coming up to the top of the hour, and so I just want to make sure we answer anybody else's questions.
Right, currently not, but I will encourage folks.
I'm bringing up my tabs, and I'll just keep talking because I love to do that.
Oh yeah, no, please do. Okay. But folks, if you have any questions, whether they're specific in nature, the things that Geoff has been showing us, or general in nature regarding making the move to version 14, what it entails, what the impact would be on your IT infrastructure, cost, security, any other issues, let us know. We'll try to answer them now. If not, we will get you answers by the end of the day. Only we can see your questions.
Yes.
So,
And one thing too, I would like to point out that as we've been going through upgrading people to version 14, it's been a huge deal for us. Delete mode. You guys all know about spouse mode, don't you? Spouse mode is in job cost phase file entry. You know, when you're done, you say okay. You say okay. So in version, you're using it's a workstation, so you've got all this stuff. You've got and when you're in the web environment, you don't have the ability to control a piece of hardware. Web pages are not allowed to systematically. They're not allowed to make changes to your computer. We don't want that to happen, because that's when the bad people come and do horrible things. Doing is that when you're, say, looking at a accounts payable invoice that you're entering, we use our scanners. We still might use the hard buttons, the physical buttons on the scanner itself, to say, hey, I want to scan this image. And what folks are ending up doing is they scan it to, say, either they might scan it to a folder on their desktop. Now, you can take that file off of your desktop or wherever you have it, and you can drag it into this window, and it starts to upload automatically. I can also do it the old-fashioned way by saying, hey, I want to choose a file, and I can do it, I can upload from there. If I want, we had batch scanning in version 13, but not like this. Batch scanning is everywhere in the system now. So if I have a bunch of invoices, I can scan them all in, or a bunch of data, and I can say I want this one, and I want this one, and this one, and I want to assign them to this invoice. And that's really all I have to do. So the idea is that if you have a lot of documentation that needs to be, you've got lots of different things, like an EP invoice, you've got tons of pages, go ahead and you could scan them all in a big file and use that file, and you then use batch scanning. You can also do them on a onesie, twosie basis as well. One thing that is you don't want this piece of information to actually show up as backup for that T&M job, or it's internal, you click the little padlock icon and it will not be part of your T&M bill. When you're in project management, you can also say that if you have some supporting documentation to an RFI, you can say, I don't want to send it to a project manager, or send it to a third party or whomever. Now, this window here is not very big, so that's why we've got this pop-out button. When you click it, you actually get the same image, but in a different browser tab, and you just take your mouse and you can drag it to a second monitor. And so you can have monitor 1 showing spectrum, and monitor 2 shows you your images. So we're finding but it takes the same amount of time as it did in version 13. It's just the order that you go through is different. Rather than scanning the image, setting up your invoice and scanning the image right then and there, you might scan them all in a batch, or you might do some other things, but it's the order that they're done in is different. And folks are telling me it's basically the same. Once you get used to it, it's a done deal.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Hey, this next one I can take. Is version 13 still going to be supported in 2017? The answer is from a call-in for support, help, absolutely. We're at the end of 2017, though. We will not be issuing tax table updates at year's end as we normally would. We will, of course, be doing that for version 14. So that's the answer to that question. Got a bunch more rolling in. We do still have a few minutes before the top of the hour, so we'll keep cranking through them.
Yeah.
And again, if we don't get to everyone, please still type them in here, folks. We will get back to you individually. So next question, is there an option to allow only access to Spectrum when employees in the office would only need, and they would not need to have access outside the office? To what? As system administrator of your Spectrum system at your company, you can designate, who has access to the licenses that you own, and specifically what security access they've got to what module. So that's the general answer. There is no magic way that we can say, well, this person has left the confines of our headquarters, we're going to shut them down.
Actually, there is.
Oh, there is.
The only way I would, if you're hosting the data yourself,
yeah,
and it's on your servers, and you don't allow your person to have VPN access in, then they can only access Spectrum when they're within your organizational walls.
And we should be clear that although, cloud computing can mean many things, this is true cloud-based software, browser-based software, folks, as you've seen. However, that does not mean that, again, that you cannot host it yourself. You have complete control, and you have the flexibility and advantages of the cloud. So there's that. Next question. It's a general question. How successful has document imaging been in version 14?
After the initial, oh my God, what have you done to me? It's actually been a non-issue because, again, I travel about once a quarter around the country, doing little road shows, showing new features and functionalities, and consistently everybody says, yeah, it was hard at first, and we had to make some changes, but it's the same amount of time. It just was a different order that we went through the steps, and it's not a problem. I mean, we were concerned about it. I'll be upfront. In the beginning, we thought, oh my gosh, this is horrible. It's not even an issue.
It was one of the more difficult things to do to port over to cloud-based software, but using that, using the Ajax technologies and other things. I've sat at a trade show floor with a client who's walked up with their iPad and says, excuse me, I need to approve some invoices. On their tablet, went in, actually were able to pull up, standing in the middle of the trade show floor, full invoices, look at the preview, look at the scanned documents, approve them on the spot. So I'd say successful. Next question, Ruth. How many clients are V14 versus V13 right now? Jeff, you probably are closer to that number.
I want to say we're down. I mean, so we're what, 1,200 clients. I think we're probably 1,000 running version 14 right now.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's really, we're on the downhill slide. There's only a few folks left. But yeah, all new clients, of course. But we've had huge, significant clients that are significant in size that have upgraded without problem. There's always a learning curve on the fact that you're going to see it looks different, things look sort of, there's some changes that any pre-training you can do for your folks will definitely help you out.
Right, and we of course work with you through the whole process. We can definitely set up test servers for you, which is a great way to get set ready to go off the blocks with a version 14 upgrade. But we have plenty of experience moving folks of all sizes up to version 14 from 13. Let's do a time check, just a few more. We've got 3 minutes. We'll do a few more. Will existing document imaging TIFF files be converted to PDF?
Good question. Yes. The answer is no, but the TIFF files will still work. TIFF TIFF files will continue going forward as well. So if you want to store them as TIFF files, you can, but you can store them as PDF. They can even be Word docs, because when you drag and drop that file in, we're just going to make a copy of it. We tag it and put a copy of it in the DI folders. So you could have an Excel spreadsheet that you bring in, and when you want to use it in the future, you click on it, it downloads, and there you go. So, but yeah, your existing data, you'll still have access to it, and even though they're TIFFs, they'll still appear and render just fine on the screen.
Great. One question was how many folks are left to upgrade? Roughly 200
Yep.
folks, many of whom are joined us here today.
Yep.
And if you wanted to choose a date, let's say this individual is indicating possibly February, when should we contact? The sooner the better. And even if you don't have a definite date, we can get you penciled in, plan resources, let you know what you need to do on your end. Contact your account manager. At the very end here, we'll throw up a slide, make sure everybody knows how to do that. But yeah, start the process right away.
Yeah.
Now, we are right at the top of the hour. We have a number of questions that we did not get to. Folks, we will be getting to you, Joff and or myself, emailing you with answers, or your account manager, with answers to your questions. So thank you very much for your participation in this. Again, you should see on screen right now ways to contact us, Joff's email, my email, happy to hear from you. Also note the account manager's email, accountmanagers@dexterchaney.com, where managers is slightly abbreviated. That way, even if you don't know who your account manager is, we do, and the right person will get back to you, answer any of your questions, be your point person for success here. With that, I want to personally thank everybody for your continued business, for staying with Dexter and Cheney for as long as you have, and hopefully continuing the ride with us as we continue to, as Joff said, constantly upgrade, improve our software, keep the leading technologies out there in front of you, so you will stay current, whether we like it or not. And believe me, I don't like change any more than the other person. But it's inevitable, and we're here to help you through it. So with that, Joff, if you have any closing remarks.
Nope. Well, I was just going to say, it's a shameless plug right now out on Dexter Cheney Online. I have a blog. In that blog, there's a link to a webinar that I'm giving on the new features that will be coming out this week. This week we're releasing a service pack. So in September, the webinar will be held going over all the new things that we've added to Spectrum just in the last quarter. So yeah, feel free to join us, even though you're not on version 14 yet, just to get an idea of the changes that we make each service pack. Kind of exciting.
That's great. All right. Well, folks, a number of people have asked, will this be available? Yes, we'll absolutely send you a little PDF of my terribly exciting slides, but even more, a recording of this webinar, so you can take a look back through it and at your leisure share it with your colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of the day, great weekend coming up, and we'll see you back online at Dexter Cheney Online, hopefully pretty soon. Take care, all.